Hello, you're watching TVP World News. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Officials from NATO and Ukraine are gathering at the alliance headquarters today for a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. The attendees will include U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who will most likely take an observer role at the meeting. This will be the first gathering of the group that will feature members of the newly appointed Trump administration. Wednesday's event marks the first time that the United Kingdom, and not the United States, convened the gathering in Ramstein. Secretary Hegseth, although in attendance, is not expected to present further support plans for Ukraine. Ahead of the meeting, a U.S. official told the Washington Post that the Pentagon chief does not plan to hold separate talks with his Ukrainian counterparts and will most likely restrict his role to that of an observer. The same person told the outlet that the most important outcome of the Ramstein summit will be the American commitment to do everything possible to keep Ukraine fighting. Hegseth is expected to reiterate President Trump's commitment to a diplomatic end to the war and highlight the need for increased European leadership on securing assistance to Ukraine. Just ahead of the meeting, bilateral talks were held between U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth and his British counterpart, John Healey. If Europe does not stand with Ukraine, whatever the US does, then Russia will prevail, said Scott Lucas, professor of international politics at the University College Dublin, when discussing the expectations surrounding the Munich Security Conference and the Ramstein Group meeting.
Whether they will be supportive at the Munich Security Conference, I think they'll give a very cautious statement. I think J.D. Vance is not a supporter of helping Ukraine. He's not a supporter of working with Europe, as we saw at the AI conference yesterday, where the U.S. made that disgraceful statement, working against any type of coordinated effort. I think you have to look at individual U.S. officials as to whether they continue to maintain influence. And I repeat, the two officials I'm watching are Keith Kellogg, the U.S. envoy, and the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz. If they can continue to maintain influence, since they support military aid to Ukraine as part of the negotiations with the Russians, there is hope that the Americans will be constructive. If Waltz and Kellogg are pushed to the side, and we have to listen to Pete Hegseth or J.D. Vance as well as Donald Trump, we better get ready to be tough. And we will need to be tough, because if Europe does not stand with Ukraine, whatever the U.S. does, then Russia will prevail.
Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, has once again become the target of a massive Russian attack, this time using ballistic missiles and UAVs. Our correspondent Oz Katerji is in the Ukrainian capital. Hello, Oz. Can you tell me about what effects these brutal Russian attacks had this time?
Good morning. Well, obviously, this campaign is intended to terrify and punish the civilians of Ukraine. We have had one person killed and 4 others wounded, including a 9-year-old girl, after 4 Russian ballistic missiles, believed to be Iskander-M missiles, were fired at Kyiv overnight, with interceptions happening above the skies around 4:30 this morning, local time. It's not the only attack in Ukraine. There have been attacks across Ukraine with 123 drones launched by Russia, and at least 7 ballistic missiles, 6 of which were believed to be intercepted by the Ukrainian Air Force. But still, that's still a lot, particularly for the air defense to do. And again, there are at least 12 other casualties across the country, bringing the toll so far this morning up to 1 dead and 16 wounded. So another dark day for the Ukrainians, who will feel fortunate that they managed to intercept so many of the incoming missiles and drones heading into their territory this morning.
Oz Katerji reporting live from Kyiv. Oz, thank you very much for joining us here today, and of course, stay safe. Now, moving on to our next story. Foreign ministers of the Weimar Triangle are holding a major meeting in Paris on Wednesday. The gathering is taking place in an extended format, with the war in Ukraine expected to top the agenda. The meeting will also center on European security. Polish, German and French foreign ministers will meet with their Ukrainian, British, Italian and Spanish counterparts. They will also be joined by a representative of the European Union. The meeting will be hosted by the French foreign minister on Wednesday afternoon. The President of the United States has expressed hopes that Moscow's release of American teacher Marc Fogel from prison could signify an improvement in American-Russian relations. Speaking from the Oval Office, Donald Trump thanked Vladimir Putin and said that Fogel's release could be a big, important part of ending the war in Ukraine.
We were treated very nicely by Russia, actually. I hope that's the beginning of a relationship where we can end that war and millions of people can stop being killed. They've lost millions of people. They lost, in terms of soldiers, probably 1.5 million soldiers in a short period of time. We got to stop that war. It could be a big, important part of getting the war over with Ukraine. And we appreciate President Putin's what he did. He was able to pull it off for you, right? He was able to pull it off. We think, and you're here, and you're here, so it was great. We'll tell you a little bit more about it tomorrow, but I think we've made great progress on the war also. Getting the war, I want to get the war ended.
Following the conclusion of the AI summit in Paris, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, spoke with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. Among the topics of the meeting was the future of the EU-US alliance and the war in Ukraine. Ursula von der Leyen reaffirmed the need for a strong alliance between the European Union and the United States, as well as its importance to geopolitics. Additionally, during the meeting, von der Leyen stressed that the European Union is fully committed to a just and lasting peace in Ukraine and underscored the need for continued support for the country. Both officials also discussed cooperation on shared challenges and fair trade. Finally, they said that the US and the EU intend to prioritize economic areas of mutual interest, which include the energy sector. Brussels is replacing Washington in supporting developing countries worldwide. Europe will be involved in helping countries in need, said the EU Commissioner for International Partnerships, as the United States has announced cuts in foreign aid. The Czech Commissioner met with EU development ministers in Warsaw on Tuesday to address the issue.
The world needs more Europe, more of our fair and principled approach to international cooperation, more of our values and more of our strong commitment to democracy and to international rules and order. We want to build mutually beneficial partnerships with our counterparts, contributing to their development while also opening new opportunities for our companies.
We discussed 3 countries today in detail. Mauritania as an example of resilience building over a few years. Ukraine, which is currently our biggest effort. And Syria as a case for the future. The idea is to pool useful resources from governments, from member states, and from the private sector. We as Europe want to be a geopolitical player who is not shy about democracy, about our values, about human rights.
The Romanian Constitutional Court has ruled that the President of the Romanian Senate, Ilie Bolojan, will assume the country's presidency after the sudden resignation of President Klaus Iohannis. The court's decision provides that the vacancy in the presidential office constitutes grounds for an interim leader to take over effective immediately. Bolojan has been the head of the National Liberal Party since last year's annulled presidential elections. Prior to taking on a more prominent role in Romanian politics, he was a local administration official and served as mayor of Oradea. According to the constitution, an interim president has certain limits placed on his powers. While he represents Romania on an international stage, promulgates laws and refers them to Constitutional Court for review, he cannot dissolve the country's parliament. A column of protesting Serbian students set out on Tuesday for a 115-kilometer-long march from the Serbian capital and across the country to the city of Kragujevac. The march is intended to be a show of support for the students from the city have played a crucial role in the ongoing anti-government protests in Serbia. The march was announced under a slogan referring to Serbian Statehood Day, celebrated on the 15th of February. The holiday marks the adoption of the country's first constitution in Kragujevac in 1835. The marching students aim to join a large demonstration planned in Kragujevac for Serbian Statehood Day. The mass protests in Serbia were triggered by the collapse of a concrete canopy at a train station in Novi Sad, which killed 15 people. The protesters blame widespread government corruption and negligence for the tragedy. And now we're moving on to nature's dam builders. The Czech Republic is welcoming the role of beavers in helping divert water over riverbanks and creating a thriving wetland ecosystem. However, in neighboring Poland, many see the animals as a threat rather than help in preserving the natural environment.
In the Czech Republic, beavers have overtaken an expensive river restoration project and done the work for free. The aquatic rodents saved the budget 1.2 million euros by building 5 dams over the course of 4 years. Meanwhile, next door in Poland, beavers' handiwork isn't met with the same appreciation. Officials in the country's Subcarpathian region have authorized a cull of 555 beavers over the 3 years in an attempt to limit the damage allegedly caused by the animals. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk blames some of the damage from last year's flooding in Poland on beavers, arguing that beavers dig into dikes, exacerbating flooding. On the other hand, the British government reporting the success of a program launched 5 years ago to reintroduce beavers to southwestern England as part of flood mitigation strategy.
By increasing natural retention, beaver can contribute to both better flood risk management and better drought management.
Polish biologists argue that there should be financial incentives for people who agree to have beavers in their area.
Environmental payments, which are part of common agriculture policy of EU. But unfortunately, this system didn't establish as a common practice, and still beavers, unfortunately, are persecuted, they are shot.
Environmentalists hope that Polish authorities will opt for more holistic methods to manage this beaver fever.
And with this, we conclude our news bulletin. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.